Thank you. We do also have one gentleman who was not able to express his opposition. So just your name, organization you represent, and your opposition.
I've been here so long I forgot my name. Les Clark with Independent Oil Producers Agency, and I strongly oppose. And thank you. Thank you.
All right, I just wanted to go over for the purpose of the committee and the public the two sets of amendments that the author is taking in committee. I would characterize there being two groups. There are amendments that the author is taking, and then there are things that are still to be worked on. The issues that we passed out language that I hope is clear to folks. Number one is the clarification of fixing the natural gas issue in Section 20 findings by amending language to be technology neutral. And then secondly, to add POUs to the transportation electrification allowance allocation section in Section 4. Those are the amendments the authors agreed to take. And there are, of course, some issues that have been brought up by the opposition that we are attempting to work on. I would say the most prominently the question of what paths to get to the fuel reduction will we take. It has definitely been something we have heard in previous hearings and in this one that we need to get around the issue of oversight and around the issue of clarification of what kind of paths would CARB take to get to a 50% reduction in petroleum use in motor vehicles. I really want to highlight what I view as inaccuracy on the part of the opposition to try to characterize this as a reduction in production. There is no reduction in production that's mandated in this bill because half of the oil used in this state is imported. So technically, you could conceivably comply with this bill without reducing production in the state of California if you just weaned yourself off of foreign oil. With that, I want to take it to the committee. I have Mr. Harper first. Mr. Harper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things I just wanted to note and disagree with is one of the characterizations was made that young people don't want to drive, and I'm not sure which neighborhood that may be from, but I know in mine and locally, things are just like when I was a kid. Teenagers like to drive; they like to express their freedom, and given a choice, people don't want to be constrained by transit. It's often a question of just how long transit takes. But one of the points that my wife often brings up, there's a difference in terms of how you feel on transit if you're a 6-foot-tall guy versus being a pretty girl. Sometimes you draw a lot of unnecessary attention when you are on mass transit. But people do want their freedom. People also want their privacy. And so a part of the concerns that I have is how many issues are shifted over from the state legislature, which is accountable directly to the voters, to CARB, and how much they may be willing to go into issues, whether it might be gas rationing, mobility restrictions, family surcharges, potential forcing people over to electric vehicles outside of a normal consumer choice situation, and also the question of mobility monitoring, which of course contains a lot of privacy questions. But for these reasons and others, I'm very concerned. But overall, one of the questions that I do have that's most fundamental is the moving goalpost. For big business is often can live with a lot of regulation because they have the large economies of scale. They've already succeeded into building up their companies, and often they're just asking for, we'd like to know at least what the rules are, going forward rather than changing with new legislation every few years. But the other side is that small business, emerging businesses, tomorrow's potential big businesses are often barred from entry or barred from growth because they simply can't survive with all the regulations. And those are the people that are the big concern of mine, is that that entrepreneurial spirit, that those folks who can react to markets that are dynamic as California's consumers may make that choice. Nevada, Arizona, Texas, or other states maybe for them. So some of my biggest questions really are, if not just this, but what's next? How do people figure out what's coming down the pike? Or is there a way to be able to declare victory over climate? What is the climate solution? Because my concern isn't just this. It's that we perpetually, for the 10 or 12 years that I'm here, every few years we're asking, hey, let's do this new one, but we have never figured out what a solution looks like.
Sure. Through the chair. And Mr. Harper, I thank you very much, for your comments as well as your perspective. Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'd just like to, on page 7 of the bill, just want to note for the record that we have on page 7, line 18, it may go not quite directly, but perhaps indirectly to one of Mr. Harper's concerns, which Mr. Harper's duly noted too. On page 7, again, line 18, no later than January 1, 2017, the State Board, that being CARB, after one or more public workshops, shall prepare a strategy implementation plan to achieve a reduction in petroleum use in motor vehicles by 50% by January 1st, 2030, and provide a copy of the strategy and plan to the appropriate policy committees of the legislature. So there is a reporting mechanism. Now, however, I will concede that perhaps for folks that is not enough. And I would say is I have a complete open mind as the measure travels, whatever constructive input that I receive from you, Mr. Harper, as well as my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. On both sides of the aisle, I have a very open mind to listen to the input that you have. I enjoy the constructive dialogue as opposed to a more very scripted dialogue with talking points read verbatim by the opposition. But my door will be open to you because what I'm sensing from you is more teeth, if you will, with regards to transparency and accountability from this entity that has been, somewhat vilified, for a whole variety of reasons, which is CARB. A couple things too I'd like to add, Mr. Harper. With regards to the comparison to the large scales of economy with regards to businesses and smaller businesses. We have 15 years moving forward. So this is not going to happen immediately. We have a lot of opportunity for planning. There's going to be ebbs and flows to figure what works, what actually does not work. And we have 15 years moving forward. It's close to 2 decades, a decade and a half to figure this out together. And with reporting back from CARB to this legislative body, we'll have that opportunity to enter that dialogue. You are, if I get this correct, you are in your first 2-year or your second 2-year term?
This is my first year.
This is your first year, Tim. So this is the first time you've had, understandably, for a variety of folks here too, Democrats and Republicans alike, a major bill at this scale with regards to carbon, and most likely because our need to reduce harmful carbon emissions, there will probably be many more measures coming down the pipeline, on both sides. So this will be one of probably many, maybe not as large as this one, at least today, but many of them will be coming down the pipeline. One thing I want to add too, and two things here, Mr. Harper, is there was a claim. It wasn't done today, but it was done, last week, and just for your consideration, that, and it goes to jobs specifically with regards to jobs. There was a claim last week. I believe Mr. Chair as well as Ms. Garcia were present, that California is losing their manufacturing jobs. And I have a report, according to the National Association of Manufacturers, that there are more California manufacturing jobs than any other state in the country. In fact, Los Angeles County is the largest manufacturing hub, not in the region, but in fact in the entire country. We have also from the Los Angeles Times, and I'll give a copy to everyone, California tops other states in job growth, but specifically with regards to manufacturing, we have the empirical data, and we can spell out the methodology also too, that the largest manufacturing hub actually in the country is in Los Angeles County. Now that's different when we use statistics, and say for example North Dakota. North Dakota overall as a whole in the aggregate has about 400,000 jobs, period. Now, if in the manufacturing industry, they have roughly about, we did the calculation, they have 26,000 jobs. So if they grew by 4%, for example, 4%, and let's say California grows by 2.5%, in terms of the aggregate raw number, we would have more jobs created with a lower percentage point than all of jobs in existence in the manufacturing space, at least with regards to North Dakota. It's how we use studies and how we manipulate percentages versus raw numbers. We have the largest manufacturing job base in California. So I am very, 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 very sensitive to what you say with regards to protecting small business. Small business is the absolute backbone to our economy. We are the 8th largest economy in the world. Enviously, we just previously occupied the 7th largest economy in the world at a 2.1 billion GDP. Our GDP actually rose to 2.31, but Brazil just surpassed us with 2.35. So we're 4/10 behind Brazil, although our economy has grown. So I think it's really important to sort of demystify and put facts on the table as it pertains to jobs. And also to, Mr. Chair, and I just want to state it for the record, I know there was, I believe, Mary Jo Toccoli, who from the California Small Business Association, who claimed support of AB 32 and was supporting AB 32. We looked through all the records. Imagine, we spoke with the authors, also to Speaker Emeritus Fabian Nunez, as well as Senator Fran Pavley, and there was no record at all whatsoever stating that Mary Jo Toccoli was in fact a supporter in any form, way, or shape representing the California Small Business Association. So that's why it's very important that we demystify and clarify a lot of the confusion that is meant to sort of distract folks from what is at stake here. And one thing, too, well, I'll stop right there because I'm sure I'll have more questions right there, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your indulgence. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me the questions.
And we appreciate it, and my door's open to you, Mr. Harper. Thank you.
Vice Chair Dolly, and then we'll take Mr. McCarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I first want to thank the Senator for spending an hour with me last week. And I tell you, when you say your door's open, it is open, and I appreciate that. Yeah. I know that I heard this bill last week in UNC, and I know that you heard loud and clear about the ability of CARB to just implement without having some oversight. And I did actually attend the scoping period 2 years ago with Assembly Member Chesborough when we had the scoping period for AB 32. And I brought to the attention of Mary Nichols the fact that we have forest fires, which are emitting carbon, and they called that neutral. So I'm concerned about how we get to how we report and when it comes back to us, what's in that and what we've seen from the past. Because I believe that if California is going to lead the way in climate change and show how we do it to the rest of the world, that we need to do it right. And so with that being said, biomass facilities, and I'm going to talk about my district for a minute. And I know that you're aware of this. We discussed it somewhat last week, but not a lot. But all renewables aren't created equal. The public benefit to doing biomass is clean water, clean air, wildlife protection, less silt in our reservoirs, and so there needs to be some look at how how renewables are good to the public benefit, not just in the energy part of it, but also for the whole of California. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is that was more of a statement. But the other thing I want to ask you about is after talking with you last week, I did some follow-up reading on in some of the background information. So I want to talk about the 50% in fuel.
Sure.
So if I understand this right, and I'm going to read this statement here because one of the things I read, the federal law looks at dealing with improvements in fuel efficiency and reducing vehicle miles traveled will get us to 41% reduction in petroleum by 2030. I think this is called the CAFE standard. Is that correct? That there is a federal law that will give us the CAFE standard will get us to 41%. So we're really talking about 9%. Your bill would actually be taking us from 41, which is a federal standard, to 50 by 2030. So there's really is that accurate? That there's 9%. So what would be the plan to pick up that small amount, that last 9%, if the feds have already put the CAFE standard in there of getting us to 41?
Thank you very much, Mr. Dolly. Several points that I'd like to underscore with regards to the 50% reduction in petroleum use by 2030, and you make reference to the federal standards, the CAFE standards. VMT, vehicle miles traveled, is a major component. I made reference to the SB 375, then Senate President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg. Obviously, how we plan our communities, economic growth, jobs, schools close to communities, how we plan this out is absolutely critical. Hence, the strong support, which may have seemed a little odd in the beginning, perhaps, by KB Homes, which are one of the largest housing developers, not in the state, but rather in the country. The fact that they realized this and what it meant for economic growth in their specific areas sort of validated our thinking that it's not, I'm under no illusion, Mr. Dolly, none whatsoever, that fossil fuels, whether domestic or foreign fossil fuels, are going to disappear tomorrow, next year, the next decade, or in the near future, or in this century. It's not a reality. It is not a reality. But how we plan our communities better with vehicle miles traveled, also to, at the same time, how we secure better efficiency and advanced technology with the manufacturing, the automobile manufacturers is absolutely critical to reaching those goals. I had stated earlier, because of the good policy that has moved forward from this legislative body, and Senator Fran Pavley played a major, major role. She's one of the icons when it comes to the environmental movement, not in the state, but rather in the whole country, is that if you're in Alabama, and if you drive a F-150 truck, or in Louisiana or Texas, and you're going hunting, well, guess what? When you buy that truck, it has a California standard. Those are California-built standards. You know, whether your BMW and your plant is in a right-to-work state in South Carolina, and they're manufacturing the BMWs over there, or in Mexico, in Chihuahua, they got a Chrysler plant or Ford plant. Those are the California standards that have been built in to provide much more efficiency for the consumer. So the oil industry totally agrees with the idea that they may not be entirely happy, which I understand. They have a certain business model, but if you get better efficiency, more miles for your technology of the automobile that you purchase, then obviously you have more money in your pocket to spend on your family, invest in your family. So largely, we're talking about VMT. We're also talking about advanced technologies in automobile manufacturing for California. We're talking about 15 years on out. Plus, too, we're talking about biofuels. NASCAR right now, for those who are fans of NASCAR right now, this is official. This is real. This is you can go look on site. We can give you all the information. We're not making this up. I don't want to get in the habit of doing that. I want to be very clear and honest and transparent. If you still disagree with me, then at least we'll disagree with each other in a very respectful way. But NASCAR right now they have 15% biofuels added to their mix. So in Daytona and everywhere else that they're driving their car, whether it's Fontana down in Southern California, they got 15% mix. NASCAR, in many ways, is much more, interestingly, much more advanced in terms of the clean car technologies than we are in the state of California. So the VMT and better efficiency in our vehicles.
So real quick, I just want to follow up. I want to make sure that we're talking about if the CAFE standard is going to get us to 41, we're talking about that extra 9% that's going to be out there. And the other thing I want to do is just, again, thank you for taking the time to meet with me last week. I'm going to be laying off your bill today. Looking forward to come back and talk to you about how we get from here to the 50%, because I think it's very important to the business community, such as myself, and I know that I explained to you how AB 32 impacted my business, and so how we do it is really what matters. It's not. I know this bill's going to get out, and I know that it's going to move forward, but I want to be able to hopefully craft it in a way that the business community can understand how they're going to get to the 50%.
And through the chair, just very briefly, and I want to thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for the time that you gave me as well, because you educated me. Obviously, you're up, northeast of us here in areas that urban legislators often simply don't go. And you educated me with regards to AB2 regulations, farming equipment, what the consequences, unintended consequences were, how we engage on that, how we deal with that situation. And biomass is absolutely critical for certain regions of the state of California with regards to sustained economic growth. So thank you for educating me as well too. We're on the same page. We want clean air, we want clean water, we want economic growth, and we want as least disruptions as possible.
Members, I just want to remind you that this hearing has now gone for an hour and 25 minutes, and we have 13 more bills. Mr. McCarty.
Okay, no worries. I'm going to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, thanks for bringing this measure to our attention over here. I'm in full support of what we have here today. I think this furthers California as the leader in clean energy, certainly cleaning our air, and being an environmental leader throughout the planet. This bill certainly has three elements: the 50% petroleum issue, the 50% standard for RPS, and the 50% efficiency improvements for buildings. No one mentions about that, by the way. You didn't hear one word about that, but that truly is significant. If we could achieve that, we'd be able to do a lot of good with our environment here in California. So I just wanted to touch upon two of the other issues. The one that we certainly hear the most about today is the 50% reduction in petroleum. And, I just wanted to bring up, I see Senator Pavley here in the audience for one of the bills we have next, one of the 13. And I remember, 10, 12, 13 years ago with 1493, that was quite a big lift and lawsuits across the nation. I know California stepped up and defended that. I know jurisdictions, including the city of Sacramento, signed an amicus brief to make sure that we could support that issue. But I remember the argument saying, no way, we're not going to be able to do it. And certainly it shows that, by California putting down a marker, we were able to lead the way. And I'm very confident about this with the CAFE standards and others, that having this 50% marker, we will be able to do so. Certainly, it's a big number, 14 billion gallons of fuel per year. To the average person, it seems like there's no way we could make that, turn the corner on that. But I'm confident with the direction we're headed and other policies in place that we will certainly make the way, and that's an important marker in there. I wanted to focus really on the last issue, maybe ask you a couple questions, and that's the RPS issue. I'm 100% in on the standards. There were a few issues that were raised today, and I maybe wanted to see if you could respond to them or enlighten us on your thoughts on them or potential direction. One is the charging stations, knowing that if we focus on the number one, the petroleum decrease, we need more people to get in cars that are electric, plug-in hybrids, and so forth. So we need more or less options throughout California to do that. So maybe you can talk about your thoughts on that. But I think the bigger issue too is the RPS standards and the solar roofs. And I know that you've been a champion trying to make sure that consumers throughout California, including people with limited means, have access to the solar revolution. So how do we blend those two things together to make sure that we can have those standards work with the investor-owned utilities and our munis, like we have right here in SMUD, and achieve those goals? So maybe you can touch on those issues first.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McCarty. And what I'll do is I'll sort of very quickly just speak to the charging station, the transportation electrification, and then secondly, obviously the DG issue, rooftop solar versus utility solar, utility scale solar. I will give you a somewhat rather ambiguous perspective, and then I'll understand. I'll explain to you the reason why. You're absolutely correct with regards to the growth of electrical vehicles in California. If in fact we're going to meet our carbon goal reductions, we need to consume less carbon. So we need an infrastructure. It's not the chicken or the egg that comes first. Obviously, we need an infrastructure that's built out there. We want to make sure that all players, stakeholders have an opportunity. Munis, the POUs, MOUs, as well as the investor-owned utilities, the IOUs, PGs, Southern California Edison, as well as San Diego Gas and Electric, have an ability also too to participate in the building of the infrastructure so they can be pervasive throughout the state of California, not just in certain locations. They have to be practical if in fact folks are getting from point A to point B. For transportation electrification, agree. We have amended the measure accordingly. What perhaps with regards to ChargePoint, and I have a lot of respect, for ChargePoint and the leadership at ChargePoint. It's an excellent visionary, the president and CEO of ChargePoint. That's a little more internal squabble, because we're all on the same page on this issue with regards to transportation electrification, and I will look forward to my conversation with the folks at ChargePoint. On the issue of the DG, obviously, the issue with DG. And if you have a perspective, whether it's online or offline, I'd be more than happy to listen to your perspective. One of the things I've had a concern about is to have, I think it's a false choice to have a debate with regards to rooftop solar versus utility scale solar. Irrespective of that decision, speaking with the heads of the respective IOUs as well as the POUs, just recently as of last week, I'm in this process of receiving all the information and hopefully, sometime soon making a decision with regards to that. It was made reference by several of the representatives from the IOUs to issues that are on the table primarily for them, again, which is the DG issue as well as the banking issue and more flexibility with regards to short-term contracts. My goal has always been, if we can harness the power of the sun, let's do it. And let's make sure that all individuals, irrespective of who they are and where they come from, have access to DG. And that's why, through real accomplishments through this legislative body, specifically from SB 535, for the first time now, we have individuals in Sacramento. We have individuals in southeast Fresno. We have individuals in other parts, East Los Angeles, who are now receiving rooftop solar for their residences, individuals who now will see an incredible decrease in their utility bills. I want to hear your perspective. I'm hearing a lot of perspectives on both sides of this debate, from the utility side to the IOU as well as the individual residential promoters and advocates of this issue. But I will be honest, it's something that right now I am grappling with at this moment right now. I am right now on the 50-yard line, not leaning towards this goalpost or that goalpost, but in the process of taking all this information in as we speak right now. And I'm not trying to be coy or withhold information in my thinking, but I'm being brutally honest on this point specifically.
And I'll also say something about electrification. It's, obviously I'm a ChargePoint customer. I use it for my electric car, which, by the way, is actually one of them, the one my wife uses, is very cheap to drive, $150 a month, leases, so people out there can afford electric cars. But I will say that the difficulty is that you want to have a system that incentivizes the IOUs and the POUs to build more infrastructure, but you also don't want to put out the pioneers of the industry out of business. They may not have the capability themselves to scale it to the number of charging stations that we need in the state, especially to make sure that we hit underserved areas with charging infrastructure. Obviously people who live in apartments need more charging infrastructure than people who have single-family homes, right? If we are going to promulgate electrification, and we are going to need the help of the utilities to do that. And the quandary I think the author is facing is how to do that and still have the pioneers of the industry be able to continue what they're doing as well.